As you probably heard by now, there are some major changes come to the real estate industry, but how do those changes affect what we're doing here in the Florida and the South Florida market? In this video, we're going to cover some of these changes that are coming, whether we like it or not, as well as how these changes are going to affect our market and where our home price is going to go and what's going to change for buyers and sellers. But before we do that, if you're new here, my name is Joe and my team and I would love to help you with your real estate journey, whether you're looking to buy, sell, invest, or even rent anywhere here in the state of Florida. My contact information is down below, but now let's jump into it and let's see what these changes really are. All right, so let's start off. With these changes that are coming with the NAR settlement, number one, they still have to be signed off on by the judge. However, it's looking like most likely they will be. So these changes will take effect in July of 2024. So let's talk about the big changes that are coming. So number one, we have the buyer broker agreements. And yes, this has existed already, but now it's going to be more enforced. So in a lot of states already, before you did anything, you got buyer broker agreements signed. And now moving forward, everywhere in the country is going to have to do this. So whether you want to go see a house just this one off, or you're starting to work with this realtor full time, you're going to have a buyer broker agreement signed prior to doing this. And I think that's actually probably a good thing in a lot of senses because it does help a lot of buyers from just kind of bouncing around from agent to agent. It kind of ends up similar to that of a listing agreement where like you're locked in with that agent for now. Obviously there's different ways of getting out of it, but it helps make sure that that agent's going to do what they say they're going to do and also help the client at the end of the day. With that being said though, you're going to have a negotiated fee and services prior to showing. So if you want to go see this one house today and you don't know any realtors, before you do that, you're going to have to meet with this realtor or have this buyer broker agreement with agreed upon services as well as fees / whatever commission they're going to be paid ahead of time. We don't know necessarily where we're going to be going with this yet in terms of open houses because you're going to have people coming in and out. That's where it's kind of a gray area. However, on the flip side of things, I think it does help a lot of clients in making sure that they know exactly what they're getting into with the realtor. Not necessarily just someone who's going to open a door. You're going to have the list of services and know exactly what that realtor is going to do for you. On the flip side, for realtors, it also helps them to be a lot more creative. I mean, there's a lot of different avenues as well as show their value and be a little bit more niche down into finding exactly what they want to do. So for example, here in South Florida, you'll be able to work with more buyer's agents who specialize in waterfront properties, those who specialize in condos, those who specialize in beachfront condos, those who specialize in 55+ communities, those who specialize in resort style communities, those who specialize in properties with 1+ acre because we don't have a whole lot of those, and those, as well as those who specialize in new construction as well. Now, not to say that's never existed, however, it's going to be a lot more transparent, and I think that's really the big takeaway from this entire settlement and what we're moving forward to, a lot more transparency, and obviously with the internet, we've had more and more transparency, but I think this really opens up the door as well as helps consumers overall. Because I mean, South Florida, the market in general is very, very different as you go from like Miami-Dade to Broward to Palm Beach. And then even within those counties in general, it's very different. And then go into like Central Florida, go into the Tampa area, go into Naples, Jacksonville, Tallahassee. Like there's a lot of different avenues within the entire state, and having someone who has your best interest in mind at the end of the day on the buyer side as well as the listing side is extremely important. With that being said, moving forward for a lot, what's probably going to become very customary is going to have a professional presentation, very similar to that of a listing presentation with buyers, especially relocation buyers. I think that's going to be a big thing. A lot of people do relocate here to Florida, or they're buying a second home or a vacation home. So understanding that agent and what they're going to be presenting and offering to you is going to be a big point, as well as having that agent show their skills and services and what they've done in the past to be able to help facilitate you in this transaction. As well as I think there's going to be a little bit more customizable aspect of it per client, and actually showing them like, hey, we're going to be looking for FSBO properties, we'll be looking for expires, those are off market, as well as what's on market as well, and helping you kind of narrow down your search and make it as easy as possible. Next up is the commissions, and the headlines are a little bit misleading. They seem to make it sound like the standard is 6%, that's the only thing. Well, I can tell you straight up that's not true. I've gotten paid 1%. I've also gotten paid a flat fee on some. On both the listing side as well as the buy side. So commissions have always been negotiable, but now it's going to be, they want to make it more transparent, but at the same time, it's going to be a little bit less transparent. And obviously the commissions vary based on negotiation, as well as a lot of different factors when you're going into things. The biggest thing at the end of the day, it's still supply and demand. Obviously something that's a little bit more of a hot property, I can understand where the seller wouldn't want to offer a concession and or a commission on that. And the same thing, if you're coming from out of state and you don't know anything about an area, you're gonna wanna hire someone who's well worth their money and understands the areas that you're looking, as well as the type of properties that you're looking for, as well as any of the nuances with both the area as well as contracts. I mean, you want it to be going as smooth as possible, and you don't want to be having to hold everything and juggling all these balls plus whatever you're doing for work. That is the real estate agent in Florida's job, is to pretty much make the transaction as smooth as possible for you. With that being said, with the commissions, they're no longer going to be having an offering of the buyer broker compensation in the MLS. So prior, like if you go on Zillow, you can see like buyer broker compensation is X amount. They're no longer going to have that. However, you, as of right now, and from my understanding of it, you can have it on like a broker website or your own personal websites, which can open the door to a lot of opportunities as well. So like, again, like I was saying, and here in South Florida, if like there's a lot of websites for condos, there's a lot of websites for getting back to being niched down and different aspects of what you're looking for. There's still opportunity to present that. With that being said though, commissions can still be paid to the buyer's agent. So they can offer concessions in the MLS. They just can't have it as a buyer broker co-broke in the MLS. But it must be asked for in the contract. It's open to negotiation, and the buyer agent can actually be paid, cannot be paid, more than the pre-negotiated amount that they talked about in their buyer broker agreement. So there's really no blanket compensation. It was the biggest takeaway. Sellers can kind of negotiate from buyer to buyer, which opens up in Pandora's box with a couple of different opportunities moving forward. However, with that being said, the three main ways that buyer brokers are now going to be compensated is number one, the buyer compensates them. Number two, the seller compensates them through a concession. And number three is going to be a combination of both, the buyer as well as the seller concession to pay that buyer broker fee, or that buyer commission fee that was pre-negotiated as part of the buyer broker agreement. Now, all in all, I think that transparency will definitely help the industry as well as the markets move forward, as well as I think compensation should always be a free market conversation with client to client. There's always going to be people who don't offer anything. There's always going to be the flat fee. I mean, there's always a difference of opinions, and there's always a difference of opportunity. With that being said though, how does everything that we just talked about affect the South Florida and the Florida markets moving forward? Number one, let's talk about the prices. A lot of people say that this could help lower prices because they're not paying as much commission and things like that. However, I'm going to be honest, taking my realtor hat off now, I'm putting my seller hat on. If I'm not offering a commission anymore, I'm just thinking there's more money for me to put in my pocket. I'm not necessarily going to lower prices, and that's just one way I think a lot of people are going to think about it. On the flip side, I think some will lower their prices because they're not necessarily having to pay that commission. It's just less of a closing cost for them to pay, and it could help them sell at the end of the day. With that being said, it still comes down to supply and demand. We're still creeping up there in terms of supply. Overall in the South Florida market and Florida in general, we do have a lot more condos and townhomes for sale than we do single family homes. However, single family homes are starting to creep up. On the flip side of things, I think we still have some major systemic issues that aren't necessarily related to compensation. They are actually more related to insurance. I think that's really the biggest kicker right now that we're still facing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please let me know in the comments down below and I can kind of explain it to you more. Or if you guys want me to make a video on some of the insurance issues and what's going on with the roofs and things here, please let me know. I can make a video on that as well. Another thing to think about though, all these changes that all of a sudden seem like earth-shattering and huge and definitely changing have been going on in a lot of other markets as well. So for example, in New York City, all these changes that they've proposed already take place. They don't have an MLS. They do get buyer broker agreements signed, and business for the most part is as usual. Yes, do they have people who don't use representation? Yes, but that's like anything else. Like, think about it. Best example of it is if you go to buy a car from someone. You can go to buy a car from, for example, the Ford dealership, go buy a used car, or you can buy it off someone off of Auto Trader who's a private seller. There's options that are endless for you, and that's the nice thing about it. You don't have to use representation if you don't want to. I think the biggest takeaway from the entire thing is there's going to be a learning curve and there will be some adjustment. However, I think business will go on per usual here in South Florida and Florida in general. It'll just be adjusting to some of these changes. However, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think this is going to negatively affect the real estate market, or do you think this is going to positively affect the real estate market? And if you or anyone you know are looking to buy, sell, invest, or even rent anywhere in South Florida or Florida in general, we would love to be your real estate resource of choice.